What was your rank in the Army?
I was a private first class. I was a replacement. They filled in whatever they needed people, and they did it that way.
Okay. What year were you born? I think you told me already.
1924.
1924. And then you had told me, you said you were in World War II?
Yes.
And what branch of the Army were you in? What branch did you serve in?
Infantry.
Infantry. And then where did you serve? What country?
I served in France.
France.
Did you serve before, after, or during the D-Day?
After D-Day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shortly thereafter, or?
D-Day was in June, and I then went in July.
Okay. So you were kind of trying to sweep through, working over to the German border?
Right.
Okay. Which part of the country were you in then?
Well, it was it was the middle of France, trying to move up toward Germany and
okay.
that area there.
Did you run into the hedgerows as well then?
Yeah, we were in hedgerows.
Okay.
They were very, very deadly.
Yeah, I was just talking to Maury. He said that was not good for mobility.
No, it was not.
Did you run into experiences as well where he said that they would take the tank and they would run it through the hedgerow just to make a path?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's very interesting that was the best way to get around there.
Mm-hmm.
So about how long did you spend in France then?
That was about 8 months.
Okay. Did you have more military service after that point, or was that you were done at that point?
Well, I was in the hospital there in Paris for a while, and then they sent me over to England to be there for a while, and then I went back to the United States.
Okay.
Mr. Keekstra, what was your rank?
Lieutenant in the U.S. Navy.
Okay, you're in the Navy.
So we did have a Navy representative.
What year were you born?
I was born on Easter in April 20, 1919.
Okay.
And do you know what a yeoman does? A yeoman is like a secretary. And so I went to Toledo, Ohio, to classes in order to become a yeoman. And a yeoman helps fixes the orders for people to come and to go and so on. So I knew how to type, and they say, can you do office work? I said, yes. Well, here's a broom. So,
ain't that the truth?
That's part of it.
So after I finished yeoman school, I was toward the top of the class, so they said, where do you want to go? And they gave me several options where to go. And I picked Glenview Air Base. And that was near where O'Hare is. And I picked that because my girlfriend lived in Oak Park, Illinois.
It's nice and close by.
And I had 2 years of college. 3 years. I wasn't finished. I went to Calvin College for 2 years, and then I went to Northwestern for 1 year. And then I made application for officer school after I'd been there a time, and because I didn't have 4 years of college, but I had 3, and I was not married, so I could get in. And we had school at downtown Chicago. And we had different courses. for training for an officer. And we had navigation and gunnery and different things like that. And when we finished the training, I was an ensign in the Navy. And we graduated in the morning, and in the evening we got married. I did satisfactory work in my training, and they said, you can stay right here and teach other men to be officers. So I stayed right in Chicago.
So you have to stay stateside then.
Yeah, and so after a while, after some months or maybe a year, I don't know exactly the time, and we had one child, a little girl, and they decided to open a school, another school down in Hollywood, Florida. So they sent me down there to teach navigation. And when I had enough points, then I was discharged and went back to Chicago, and they gave me a discharge. And I was in the Navy for 4.5 years, from before the war until after the war.
You were in which branch of the service?
Army.
Army.
Yeah.
And what was your rank when you?
Oh, PFC.
PFC. So you did the real work.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I was busy.
You were busy?
I was a 81 millimeter mortar man.
Okay.
And we shot that thing many rounds in France and Germany. Sometimes from morning till night.
So a lot of noise. A very busy, loud time.
Yeah, and that affected my ears.
Sure, I bet it did.
So I have quite hearing loss.
Yes. And this was World War II, even though your plates was one, right? On your four-wheeler.
Yeah, World War II. Yeah.
Okay. What year were you born? Or isn't that polite to ask?
I'm sorry.
What year were you born, or isn't that polite to ask?
1924.
1924. So how did you enter the service? Were you drafted? You volunteered?
Yeah, I was drafted.
You were drafted? What year was that?
1945.
1945. So
No.
no,
that's wrong.
that must be when you
1943.
43.
Right out of high school.
Right.
Well, I was going to. The draft board wanted me to come right away after I graduated from high school in May, but my dad said, no, you have one of my sons already. This one has to stay here until we get the corn picked.
Okay.
And the minute the corn was out,
They were back.
I was off to Des Moines.
Des Moines was boot camp?
Yeah.
So,
Well, boot camp I had in Camp Roberts, California,
okay.
but I had to go to Des Moines first.
For
I'm from
induction.
Iowa, so
You're originally from Iowa.
yeah.
So, what can you tell me about boot camp? I've never had the experience.
I liked basic training a lot. I was a strong farm boy, used to these high shoes. A lot of the kids, I shouldn't say men, because we got to be men pretty quick.
Yes.
But anyway, we would be on marches, and those poor city fellows that sat behind a desk all day,
Like me?
they didn't like
We would
they didn't like the
survive.
shoes, they didn't like the rifle, they didn't like the 45-pound backpacks. So sometimes I had a backpack on each arm and a rifle on each arm beside my head. And I really liked it. But the thing that I really liked the most was the rifle range.
Okay.
Those M1 rifles were amazing. I could hit a target 500 yards away, bullseye every time.
So you were a farm boy, you grew up with guns, you grew up shooting?
I did a lot of shooting.
But,
Yeah,
and you served in Europe.
Europe.
Which part of Europe were you? I think you started out when you told me.
Well, we landed in Marseille after our
Okay.
trip across the Atlantic, you know. And then we went north quite a ways. I don't know, you know, I really didn't care.
Yep. It's one hill at a time, huh?
Yeah. And then we got in combat, and then we worked our way toward Saarbrücken. And somewhere along the line, we got in Patton's army, the 7th Army.
You bet.
I was in the 70th Division.
Okay.
And we were the supporting army for the guys in the Bulge.
Okay.
We kept those Germans busy with our mortars and riflemen. But the Lord was good to me. He let me survive.
Mm-hmm.
But the Army experience was worth $1 million.
Yes.
It really was. And if I was able, I'd go again. But I don't think they want me anymore.
There's probably some young men that could serve in your place.
Yeah. I wish, though, that the U.S. government would draft every able-bodied man for 2 years.
For 2 years. There's a lot of countries that do that. Yeah.
I know. They should do that here, too. But that's okay. No, it was an experience I'll never forget.
What was your rank in the military?
PFC.
Private first class?
First class.
In the Army, correct?
In the Army.
Okay. And what year were you born?
January 29, 1929.
All right. And what wars or war were you part of?
I was part of the Korean conflict.
Okay. All right. And you served in the Army?
Served in the Army.
Mm-hmm. Any specific division of the Army?
Infantry.
Infantry?
196th Infantry.
Okay. And where in the world did you serve? Different tours or different?
I was drafted and sent to Camp Carson in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
Took basic training twice and was eventually sent in the fall of 51, was sent to Alaska.
Okay.
And spent the next year and a half in Alaska.
Mm-hmm. And then that was your end of the service in Alaska?
Yes.
Okay.
It was drafted for 2 years. So we went through basic the rest of the summer, and in the fall, they sent us up to Alaska. And with the idea we were protection for the Elmendorf Air Force Base. It was a big Air Force base up there. And at that time they were afraid of China Sea was involved. Russia was always breathing down our neck.
Mm-hmm.
And they were afraid of this happening. So that's what our job was, to protect the Air Force Base.
Okay. Very good.
So overall, being in the service, is there anything that stands out that maybe shaped the way you worked or shaped your life, like after the service?
I've always maintained, after being in the Army, any young fellas coming out of high school, if they didn't have the desire to take a certain thing or do a certain thing in college that they wanted to take up or do, 2 years in the Army is the best place where you learn responsibility, respect for other people, everything. And they teach you that, and that's one thing you learn. And it maybe should be automatic, that if you aren't going into a specific thing like in college or have a specific thing to do like that, to go into service, because does. It teaches you those things. Get along with other people, and all those things.
So, first question, Mr. Zylstra, what was your rank?
Tech sergeant.
Tech sergeant.
Which is next to a full sergeant. Two rockers, you call it.
Okay. And we already got this answer, but what year were you born?
1925, November 7.
Wow. And then what war and branch did you serve in?
I served in the Army in World War II and was stationed in the end on the island of Saipan in the Marianas Islands, in the Western Pacific.
Oh, great. And that was my last question. Where did you serve? Were you any other places?
Yes, Fort Knox, Kentucky is where I started out, where the gold is stored, the Army. But that's where I had the tank training alone, how to drive the tank and how to manipulate in a tank and shoot big shells that were probably 14 to 8 inches long, huge, and no ear protection at that time. But then I guess they thought I was worthy of having some advanced tank training. And then in Fort Ord, California, I was sent to amphibious tank training base. And from there, I took a long trip to Saipan. I went by rail, but it was by the first 7 days I was seasick by the rail.
Oh.
And we had a zigzag over there with 1,200 soldiers because the Japanese tanks were available even on the shores of Pacific near California and Oregon and Washington. So after 14 days, we landed there, and there were Japanese on the island yet, but they were probably hidden. And then about that same time is when the war ended. So our chance to go to, our assignment to go to Japan with amphibious tanks was out the window because Japan threw in the towel and said, that's it. So that was the end of that. And an interesting part of my experience at Saipan, this is really why I wanted to be a volunteer with your company and with any others. I was in a pup tent on Saipan, and after the war ended, I had no plan of going to college anywhere. Here I was, rough and ready, 19 years old then probably, and in that pup tent, God called me to the ministry. It's hard maybe for you to imagine, but it's as real now in 2016, May 27 or 8, as it was then. I argued with God for 2 hours. I did not want to go to the ministry because I didn't know what to expect. I had never spoken to people before, a number of people. I told God I would be a Christian teacher in a public school. No, you won't be that. You will be a minister. How about a Christian teacher in a Christian school? No, you won't do that either. And God knew I was one of his children. I had given my heart to Christ when I was about 14 years of age. But it was real on that island. And when I decided to give up, lo and behold, I moved back to Grand Rapids. And I started school at Calvin College in Grand Rapids. It was a good experience there. And I thought I'm going to spend 4 years here until a man, an evangelist by the name of Bob Jones Sr. at a college in somewhere in, I think it was North Carolina. He called me to, he said that they have a new university in Greenville, South Carolina. So that's where I was to end up 4 years. And since that time, God has never let me down.
Mr. Jewell, what was your rank?
I was a seaman first class.
Okay.
Pardon me, fireman first class. There was a difference between seaman and fireman. Seaman served above deck, fireman served below deck. And that was because one time most firemen were firemen. They had to take care of the furnace and things like that in the steamships.
Okay.
So, but it became electronics later on in World War II.
But they still called them firemen that were below
Because
deck?
they were below deck, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what year were you born?
1926.
26. And what wars did you serve in?
Just one. The war.
The war?
World War II.
World War II.
It's supposed to solve all the problems.
War of Wars. And where did you serve?
United States.
Okay.
I'm a dry land sailor.
Okay. All right.
So, you know, the war was over, except the war in Japan, South Pacific. And we kind of figured nothing was going to happen. Well, they didn't stop the draft. So those that didn't volunteer went in, and we took our chances. We drafted for the Marines, the Army, or the Navy. And with potlucks, I just happened to get the Navy. I could have got anything.
How old were you when you were drafted?
Oh, there you go, 18. And so we took our chances and got in. We figured we'd get back out. A lot of them didn't. The real heroes are the ones that stayed over there. I went into the Navy. I went to Camp Moffett in Great Lakes. I spent 6 weeks there. Then I was transferred over to, you take a test, they kind of figure out what you're best suited for, and I evidently had some mechanical ability, so they sent us, a group of us, to St. Louis for electrical, to be electricians, below deck. And then I got through that, and then they figured I must have a little more on the ball, so they sent us, a group of us, to Camp Crowder, Missouri, which is an Army base, to learn teletype work. And we got all done with that, and then they still had felt I had enough on ball. They sent me to San Diego for cryptography repair and maintenance. And if I told you what I did there, I'd have to kill you all. So, and then I graduated, and I got enough GI Bill to send me through college. And that was the beginning of the middle class. No hero.
What's that?
There's no hero.
Well, we still appreciate the service that you've done, much more so than I think any of us have come close to doing so.
Well, because you weren't forced to do it. If you were forced to do it, Brokaw said the greatest generation. I don't think so. We were forced in a position to either you sink or swim. And if you were put in the same position, you would be the greatest generation. If the right thing was easy to do, more people would do it. And that's the way it works out. You have to be forced one way or another to do what you're supposed to do.
Jerry, what was your rank?
PFC.
And what year were you born?
1927.
And what wars and branch did you serve in?
I was in the U.S. Army, 3rd Special Service in Germany.
What city? Cities?
First time I went to Marburg, Germany. You ever been to Marburg?
No.
Castle?
A lot of castles, but not that. That one doesn't ring a bell.
Stuttgart.
Stuttgart, oh yeah.
You've been there?
Yep.
Hoffmanhausen. Down on the Rhine River.
Yeah. Probably don't remember the name,
You know,
but you were there.
I went in as a clerk, typist in Marburg. Stayed there for a few years, not years, but a few months. And then I went and saw a show, and I said, well, those guys, they've got a better deal than I've got. Now, you must understand, I didn't get in the Army until 1945, in June.
Okay.
They dropped the bomb in August, right?
Yep, August 15th.
I was ready to go to Japan. They said, no, we'll ship you to Germany. So I went to Germany, and over there in an office, I had a German secretary working for me. And then I joined 3rd Special Service in a script and score show, soldier show. And I did that the rest of my term, and I got discharged in December 46. So I was only in a year and a half.
Year and a half. Okay.
I was very lucky.
Sounds like it.
Very lucky.
You didn't know it when you were drafted, when you were training?
No, when we were training, I played baseball in the summer and basketball that fall. And then they dropped the bomb, and then that changed everything. You know, I was very fortunate.
So you're back in the States when they dropped the bomb?
I was just finishing basic training in Fort Worth, Texas, down at Camp Walters. Yeah.
Okay.
Seems like a long time ago.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was just about 75 years ago. Huh?
Right.
All right, Mr. Van Overloop, may we ask what your rank was?
Seaman 1st class.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That was in the Navy then?
Yeah, it's about the lowest you can get. See.
That's all right. I'm sure you served well, nonetheless.
What year were you born?
27, 2327.
Okay.
It's a long time ago.
That is a long time ago.
And then, so you fought World War II then?
Yes.
In the European or Pacific?
Pacific.
Okay.
Out of ship in Pacific.
All right. Yeah. I've heard that Pacific was worse than the European.
Well, because the Japanese were different culture people.
Yeah, that's right.
Although they couldn't be much worse than the German at the time.
Yeah, yeah, different cultures.
The way they starved the captives, you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tortured them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Deliberately killed by the millions, you know, going to the gas chambers.
Yeah.
Took them in by train loads.
Yeah. I've read about that.
Yeah, I think.
You know, I could understand a civilized country like Germany could do that.
Man.
Now you see there's people my age now in Germany who tortured people. They're still running around.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about that.
Send them to the gas chamber and
Auschwitz,
and
it shows us man's nature.
What's that?
It shows us man's nature.
Yeah.
That he's able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, the Japs was understandable. You know,
they're different culture.
Yeah.
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 Oh wow.
But you see, if we would have had to invade Japan, they'd have lost more than that.
Yeah.
And we'd have lost 100 million.
Right.
Yeah. But that was the decision they made, that less lives would be lost with the bombs.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they still couldn't give up after the first one. They had to have another one.
Yeah. How about that?
I saw that place.
Really?
I saw Hiroshima. Yeah, I was there.
Did.
When did you visit there? Right after it hit?
Yeah.
You saw Hiroshima?
Mm-hmm. Just nothing.
everything pulverized, except I can see still one stone or concrete thing built, one thing in the middle of nothing.
Wow.
Tremendous heat, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did it just look like sand? Or what, like ashy? Or
I stayed on the street, so I
Yeah. Yeah, it just pulverized everything. Just gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of
People
course,
do-
a lot of people burned.
Yeah.
And suffered and suffered and suffered
Yeah.
with those burns. It was a terrible thing to do, but we saved millions and millions of people by doing that.
Yeah, and that was the decision, and it worked.
Because they were fanatic, you know. They were really fanatic.
They wouldn't stop fighting.
No.
Even if they knew they were going to be defeated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, some 20 years after they surrendered, there were still Japs in the woods.
Really?
Yeah. That didn't think that the war was over and didn't dare give up.
Wow.
What was your rank when you were in the service?
Well, I ended up machinist mate 3rd class, but I was kind of late in going into the service because I was farming and I got 2 deferments for farming, but then they put me in 1A and my dad wanted me to appeal it, but I said no, I'm going. So
Good for you.
That was in 44.
Explain, people probably don't remember in World War II the importance of the farming, and that was an automatic deferment pretty much.
So what service were you in then? The Army?
I was in the Navy. I was drafted and I had my choice of Army or Navy, and I chose Navy. I went to Great Lakes for 6 weeks and got a 10-day leave. From there, we went back to Rhode Island and got put in the Seabees.
Oh, is that
The
right?
Navy. They automatically put our whole battalion, our company into the Seabees.
Okay.
So that's where I ended up in the Seabees. So.
And the Great Lakes Naval Station north of Chicago?
Yeah.
And explain what the Seabees do.
Well, we built. Well, mainly we landed in Hawaii and Pearl Harbor, and then we stayed there till they talked about hitting the Philippines, landing into the Philippines. So we got on board LSTs in Pearl Harbor and headed east, and we ended up going into Guam, which was the Marines and the Army entered there in July, and we ended up there in August. So we didn't hit the initial invasion, which I can thank the Lord for.
Yes.
Because we went into Agana Bay right there, and you could see all the marine equipment that was on the beaches, strewn on the beaches, and I don't know how many died in that war, but we can thank the Lord. I can thank the Lord that I wasn't there that day.
Yeah.
So we was on Guam till August 14 when they dropped the bomb.
Okay.
And when they dropped the bomb, we got orders to board ship and head for. We were headed someplace we didn't know where, but then we ended up going into Tokyo Bay on August 28 of 46, so 45. Because I went in late, I had to get a certain number of points before I could get discharged. Well, I stayed till February, I think.
Of the next year then, of
next
46.
year, yeah, so I was there almost 6 months. And from there, why, I got to come back home.